what I wanted to start off with is we've had such a successful legislative season, and Sheila is going to walk us through the many successes we've had and some of the things that we have still on the front burner.
I'm delighted to do that. And again, thank you all so much for being here. As you know, Virginia Interfaith is not just the James River chapter. And in fact, the end of our name is for public policy. So we do a lot at the state level in terms of advocacy. Um, and this year was a pretty exciting one. We got a lot of our priorities through. So I'm going to drop the bill tracker in the chat so you can have a sense of, as I'm walking through all of these different issue areas and bills, you can check those out. But I'll give you the overview, and that's something you can come back to. We'll send it in a follow-up email as well. Basically, VICPP has four main issue areas and then a few side quests. First is health equity, affordable housing, criminal justice reform, and supporting working families. Those are our big buckets. That's what we've been doing for years. Supporting working families is why we got started in the 1980s. So we've been around for a while, and these are the issues that are kind of our bread and butter. Within the health equity space, we've been working for years on a policy to reduce unconscious bias, reduce all bias, really, conscious and unconscious, in healthcare. You know, women of color are 3 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women are, and that is a problem. And we finally passed this bill with bipartisan support to require a bias reduction training for healthcare professionals. Additionally, we we're working on increasing access to healthcare. So another bill that we did a lot of work on allows schools to use at-risk schools, which tend to be schools with lower budgets at their disposal. They can use some at-risk funding for school nurses, which allows kids in under-resourced areas to have access to a healthcare professional through their school. Finally, we were leading on another bill that responds to mothers and babies in pregnancies where substance exposure happens. So you might be aware that people with addiction really struggle to not use various substances. What you may not know is that under current Virginia law, you can get reported to Child Protective Services for having any of these substances in your bloodstream during your pregnancy. This is overall bad, let's say. It increases criminalization of addiction. It separates biological families. It disincentivizes people seeking care. So the original bill would have just automatically decriminalized substance exposure during a pregnancy, as long as the mother was, going through rehab and getting her prenatal medical appointments, etc. The final version turned it into a study to figure out how we can reduce criminalization of substance use. It's still a huge step forward, and we're pretty excited. Finally, we had another bill which has ended on studying the expansion of midwives. Actually, that was a budget amendment, studying the expansion of midwives so that people in rural counties in Virginia have access to midwifery care. 2/3 of counties in Virginia don't have a labor and delivery unit. Tons of people in Virginia have to drive an hour, 2 hours, even 3 hours to access maternal health care, and that is just not viable, especially if you have a complicated pregnancy. So midwives, especially in more rural areas, can help fill in that gap. So those are our health priorities. All of those bills passed. All of those bills have been officially signed into law, although we're going to have a fun photo op ceremonial bill signing of the bias reduction bill next month. Sound good? Happy to answer questions at the end, but if there are questions on particular issue areas, I'll pause after each of the big buckets so that we can touch base. Okay, So that's healthcare, health equity. On to affordable housing. The biggest bill, ah, the most exciting thing, in my opinion, that we worked on in housing this year was the Faith in Housing bill, which is sometimes called Yes in God's Backyard. And I know quite a few of you have heard me talk about this for years because we wrote the bill 3 years ago. And we've been plugging away at it ever since. But basically, this allows faith communities and congregations and other nonprofits that are exempt from property tax to automatically build multifamily housing on their land without having to go through a rezoning process. It's huge. It takes away a lot of uncertainty. It gives folks a path forward to provide affordable housing that communities so desperately need. So that's very fun and exciting. And in fact, we just had a bill signing of the House version of the bill last week, and we're hoping to get a ceremonial bill signing of the Senate version of the bill on the calendar. It'd be cool. The other fun housing bill that we wrote this year is called Expediting Affordable Housing. Virginia is weird. We're what's called a Dillon Rule state, which means that cities and counties only have the powers that the state government has explicitly given them. So there's like random brick walls you run into when doing local advocacy. This bill, this expediting affordable housing bill, takes away one of those brick walls. It allows localities, it allows cities and counties to create a streamlined rezoning process for people who want to build affordable housing. And so in the middle of Alexandria, that might mean you could automatically build 5 stories here, but since you're building affordably, we'll let you build 7 stories here and build a giant apartment complex. And it might mean in rural Floyd County, or heck, closer to y'all, King and Queen County, say, normally you are required to own 2 acres of land in order to build 1 house. What if on those 2 acres we let you build 10 houses? So it allows the localities to be very specific and intentional about what they're doing while still increasing access to affordable housing. That's fun and exciting. Localities need to pass the ordinance, but they now have permission to do so. Those are the 2 we led on within the housing space. We also supported a bunch of bills in the tenant protection space and a couple of bills on inclusionary zoning, which allows localities to require large developers to include a certain percentage of affordable units within their buildings. The tenant protection ones, the most exciting one, the one that the governor already did a ceremonial bill signing for, is called, it reduces evictions by giving folks more time to pay before they have an eviction on their record. Currently, it's 5 days. It's going to be 14 days come July 1st. There's also a great bill that reduces, it allows tenants to hold bad landlords accountable for unsafe living conditions, which is great. And there's a bunch of others. I could send you more details, but for now, that's the overview of the housing space. Any rapid fire questions on that front? All right. Moving on to criminal justice reform. You may recall that Virginia has a relatively new initiative called the Virginia Consensus for Higher Education in Prison. We've been working the last couple of years on expanding access to not just GEDs, but actually college programs for people who are incarcerated. And this year, we had a huge step forward in that path. We got a bill passed that both creates a workforce and requires people to come together from Virginia's community college system, the Department of Corrections, to make plans for people who are for correctional facilities to offer these types of classes, and also to start data sharing. It's shocking sometimes how siloed some parts of data get. But, how many people currently have GEDs or high school diplomas and would be eligible for college classes? That's something that is not publicly available. Uh, how many people get transferred between facilities with less than 6 months stay? So they couldn't do a full semester in one place or the other. Not something that's shared. So this sort of data sharing is going to inform the plan, and Virginia Interfaith was named and has a seat at that table for those conversations. So we're really pumped to have this consensus building process to move the needle on higher education for people who are incarcerated. We also obviously supported the constitutional amendment around automatically restoring voting rights to people with a felony conviction on their record. Once you've completed your debt to society, you should be allowed to come back and fully re-enter society and vote. And voting is an important part of that. So we're excited that that passed. It'll be on your ballot in November. It'll be on every Virginian's ballot in November because constitutional amendments need approval from the people. And then we also worked in coalition on several bills to improve conditions for folks who are incarcerated. That included increasing limitations for temperature controls. It included providing interpretation and translation services to non-English speakers. It included some restorative justice undertakings and other bits. We worked on the ending solitary confinement bill again, and unfortunately that one died, but we have a lot of great stuff happening in this sphere. So that's the criminal justice reform space. Brief questions before I move on. All right. Finally, our signature area supporting working families. You may have heard that for almost a decade, we've been working on requiring employers to offer paid sick days to all workers, making sure every worker in Virginia can take paid time off when they or their child is sick. Very excited. However, this is one of the bills that we are waiting with bated breath because it has not been signed by the governor yet. She proposed some amendments, sent it back to the legislature. The legislature rejected those amendments, sent it back to her. She has until Friday. That's right, Friday. She can either sign the bill, that's ideal. She can veto the bill, that's the worst case scenario, or she can do what's called pocket signature. If she just sits on it and does nothing, it passes into law without her action. We will accept that. But we do have a call to action, a petition around paid sick days that would love you to sign on to if you haven't already, encouraging the governor to sign the paid sick day bill. So I will throw that in the chat in just a moment. In the meantime, talk a little bit about some of the other worker rights bills that we supported this year. We did support increasing minimum wage, which passed and was signed. We supported covering farm workers with the minimum wage, which we passed. We supported the paid family medical leave, which is huge, very exciting stuff. And several other worker protections, including heat safety requirements for workers. And I feel like I'm forgetting one. Yes, so those were sort of the worker things. And then in addition, working families often need childcare. Childcare is crazy expensive. So we also supported several bills. One, reducing the cost of childcare and increasing the number of vouchers that are available from the state government, encouraging the formation of new childcare programs through public-private partnerships. And then another program that gets rid of what's called the funding cliff in childcare. Basically, if you're making, I'm going to say arbitrary numbers here, I don't know the exact numbers, but if you're making a certain amount of money you could be eligible for a voucher for 75% of the cost of childcare. And then you get a promotion, your salary goes up $1 an hour, and suddenly you get zero voucher for the cost of childcare. And that $1 an hour raise does not cover the 75% voucher you were receiving. So this second bill reduces that funding cliff. It gives more of a tiered approach and like how do we work together with these families. That's supporting working families. Any questions there? All right. Seeing none. Oh, Missionary Bradley, I see your hand up. Go ahead. I'll let you ask your question.
How much time did they give them after the eviction before they were able to receive housing again? Do you know?
So that is a different issue. The bill I mentioned, it's called 14-day pay or quit. That's before
Okay.
the eviction. So when a
That's
person doesn't pay their full rent,
Okay.
current law says you have 5 days to pay your full rent for the month. And if you don't, your landlord can issue an eviction notice.
Okay.
However, 5 days is tough. If you are behind or you had a car repair or just didn't get enough hours that week, whatever the case may be, a medical thing happened. This essentially says you can have 9 more days to pay your rent before you even get served that eviction. The post eviction, the effect of an eviction record on your capacity to find new housing is a different issue and one that some of our partners are looking at for next year that we would certainly want to come back and talk more about, but not one we did this year. So oh, Latasha, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate it. It's really a quick question going back to the extension date from the 5 to the 14 days. I know that you said that July 1st is when is the formal date, right? So basically those protections will not be enacted until July.
That's correct.
The tenants are still under the 5-day rule.
That is correct. Yeah, for another month and a half.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thanks for clarifying. Yes, this is part of unless something gets what's called an emergency enactment clause, it usually goes into effect July 1. Sometimes they get a delayed enactment clause and go into effect the following January. So we get a mix. We last of all have our other issues. Think of this as other duties as assigned. Of course, we are people of faith and people of goodwill have infinite issues we care about, but we can't put effort into all of them. But our other two issues that three issues, I should say, that VICPP paid a lot of attention to this session were protecting immigrants, preventing gun violence, and protecting voter rights, civic engagement. So within the protecting immigrant sphere, we co-led on a bill that prevents local law enforcement from doing immigration enforcement on behalf of federal agencies. That bill passed, signed by the governor. Hooray. We're very excited to see that moving forward. And then the other was the other bill we did a lot of work on was to protect sensitive locations. Now, sensitive locations are an umbrella term, and these sensitive locations were specifically locations that are owned and operated by local and state government. So that means that basically schools, courthouses, public hospitals, Commonwealth attorneys' offices, polling locations, even federal law enforcement could not do immigration enforcement there. That bill has passed, but we are again waiting for the governor's signature. 3 days. So I have another petition on the immigration sensitive locations bill, which I am throwing in the chat now. Please feel free to sign that. Please do sign that if you haven't yet, and feel free to share it. because immigration has, of course, been more in the headlines recently. We've been seeing a lot of action from the federal, but also from local governments and trying to respond there. On the voter protection scene, last year we supported a couple of bills to expand the to prevent people being removed from voter polls. That bill was stalled in committee. It died last year. It was stalled in committee this year, but we think there's a lot of potential for it next year. And a similar bill that also got stalled last year, which helps clarify who might need to get removed off a voter roll. The example I give there is, my coworker's name is Robert Lester. His son's name is also Robert Lester. If Robert Jr. were to move out of Virginia, he'd want to come off the voter rolls. But it's possible that the DMV might accidentally remove Robert Sr. as well. So this increases identity verification for people getting kicked off of the voter rolls. There is no evidence of massive voter fraud in Virginia elections, but this is one way to ensure that people maintain their right to vote, even in sort of confusing circumstances. And then finally, I know that the James River chapter has a very strong, heartfelt focus on preventing gun violence. And of course, you likely saw the news that the prohibition of sales of assault weapons did pass and was signed by the governor just recently. Very exciting stuff. In addition, sale of ghost guns was passed and signed by the governor. So it's got some really, really exciting stuff there, and we're gonna keep working on it. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff. Any other questions on that front? All right, so last but not least, Virginia has a 2-year biennial budget cycle. And usually the governor proposes a budget in December. That happened. Governor Youngkin proposed a budget in December. Then the House and the Senate each proposed their budgets in about February. That happened. House and Senate proposed some numbers. They were not the same. That's normal. But then usually the House and the Senate Conference Committee come together and finalize a budget in about March. They didn't do that this year. There's some really deep and interesting conversations happening around the budget. Highly recommend checking out the news. However, the final budget language has not been put together yet or brought to a vote. It is absolutely necessary that Virginia pass a budget before July 1st, but word on the street is it's not going to happen till June. That said, there are some budget priorities that Virginia Interfaith is really focusing on, including making sure people don't fall off the healthcare cliff because of the national bill limiting Medicare and Medicaid, or making sure people don't lose access to food stamps, funding that midwife program I told you about. So again, we have a petition on the budget. I will throw it in the chat. There's probably a 3-hour webinar I could do about the budget, but that is not the focus of today. Suffice it to say, there's stuff we need to do, and I am grateful for all of you being part of this network and keeping the needle moving forward. Any last-minute questions about the bills we took on, what passed, what didn't, what we're waiting on?
Thank you. And again, you can all see the thank yous to Sheila for that kind of detail, but just all the people at VICPP who had a hand in the successes. With the time we've got left, there's 2 things I want to accomplish. I'm going to skip ahead to Guns to Gardens and then step back and review a few things in context of what Sheila has shared with us. But since Guns to Gardens has kind of been our chapter signature event, I wanted to give everybody an update on that. But first, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Um, Most of you have my email address, but I know there's a handful of you that I've not had a chance to communicate with. But the reason I would like you, if you don't think I have your email address, please write me, because one of the things I'd like to do, and I've been trying to document along with Sheila, is these links that have been in the chat. And I'm going to speak more about the importance of having these links at our fingertips in a little bit after we talk about Guns to Gardens. So, Guns to Gardens, here's what came up at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, Michael Bennett had been in contact with Scotty and Stan, our raw tools experts, and what we were informed is that if we wanted to still partner with Raw Tools, Guns to Gardens, we needed to have a trained firearm safety officer on site during the event, which there are a bunch of prerequisites, but in addition to that, the firearm safety officer needed to have a 2-day class with Scotty and Stan. They had a class in North Carolina that Michael and I found out about like 2 weeks before it was going to happen. And it wasn't practical for us to send someone to have all the prerequisite training and then receive this training. Then what's going to happen is the next training session that Scotty and Stan are doing is in Colorado. So we'd have to send somebody to Colorado. So what if you had talked to me back in February or even partly into March, it was looking like we were not going to be able to pull Guns to Gardens together because we didn't have a fully trained firearm safety officer. So I kept in contact with Scotty and Stan at Raw Tools and said, well, gee, can we hire one of you or one of your other people that has done the training to come to Williamsburg, since we still have such strong support for the event? And they, the way I broached it with them is we were looking for doing something in the fall. And I asked Scotty specifically, when are you available? Rather than just kind of throw some random dates, I wanted to find out when he was available. So Scotty came back and said October 10th, November 7th, November 14th, or December 5th were days he would be available. Stan is still looking at making a list of other firearm safety officers and if they would be willing to attend, which might open up some other dates. What we're looking at now to move forward, and I'll be, if Reverend Sims has some information, update information, that'll be great if you'll share that in a little bit. We kind of used as a point of departure October 10th and November 7th as the 2 dates we wanted to look at and see if we can put something together on one of those 2 dates. So now it looks like we'll be able to host an event, and what we need to do is work with Reverend Sims and the Williamsburg United Methodist Church and see if we can put all the pieces together.
Yeah, so either of those dates work for us. We have a slight preference for October 10th because it'll probably be warmer.
Yeah.
You know how that goes. The one person did raise a concern that that will be a long weekend because of Columbus or Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, and whether we thought that would be a problem. I don't know that it will be a big issue, honestly. So that would be the only thing against October 10th, but we had definitely a slight leaning
Mhm.
around weather for that.
Oh, sure. Okay. So again, we'll use that as our point of departure. That's a good observation that we'll um, take into consideration as we move forward with this. The other thing is confirming with Scotty that he'll be available. And then the way I had left it with him is I wanted to find out from him what kind of fee might be involved that we would cover, and also housing and meals, which certainly my family, I'm ready to pick up the ball on that. I mean, this is an important enough event. Um, so for our planning committee, now we've got something concrete to work with. So our planning committee will get together, I'm sure in June, uh, and start making plans so we can be ready by October 10th. Michael, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that I did also talk with our contact at the Episcopal Diocese of Southern Virginia. Um, we had we had sort of felt out the idea of doing an event in Norfolk through the Episcopal Diocese in September. When communication kind of stalled, I was reached out to answer some questions actually posed by the diocese from their insurer, and then I went ahead and filled them in on where we're at and how we're in a little bit of a pause. Luckily, their response was that they would much rather wait and do this right than try to kind of go in half-cocked. And so I feel good about that. I do obviously this is a setback, and it set us back, you know, close to 6 months. And I do apologize. I have not had the energy that I thought I would have around this at this point. Uh, but I think this is a setback that we are going to be better for having had. We're going to
Mhm.
emerge from this better trained, better prepared, because the fact is we have made our previous events happen. They have happened without incident, knock on wood. We are very fortunate for that because we have had a bit of a dearth of training going into these events. We've had a lot of enthusiasm to make up for it, but having properly trained people is going to make insurance companies happier, and it's going to help us in a very real and actionable way if, God forbid, something does go wrong at one of these events. So I'm glad that we're doing this. I'm really exceptionally glad, Tim, you're sick of hearing me say this, but I'm so glad that you have picked up and sort of allowed me to pass you the ball on this for the last few months, just because my bandwidth has been entirely taken up. My sabbatical starts next week, and I am in a controlled descent at this point. I am exhausted. So I really appreciate all y'all have been doing on this.
Well, I'm glad it was able to come together with Scotty and Stan. That was my worry, is that we wouldn't be able to come up with a solution with them. And both of them have been very supportive. Stan was out of town, but literally the day he got back with me and was looking at what alternatives. So it looks like we'll be planning in the month ahead. So thank you for keeping this on our front burner. Then what I want to conclude with is I did put an agenda together, and I've been putting links that have been in the chat on here. And so what I want to be able to do, which is why I put my email address on there, is I want to send to each of you a copy of the agenda with the links. And the reason for that, I'll outline now. Under the legislative updates that Sheila shared with us, I wanted to reemphasize the VICPP priorities. But what I wanted to put it in context of is what are the VICPP priorities for one, our chapter, two, a congregation that's a member of our chapter or region or VICPP, or what are we doing as an individual? For example, I had a wonderful conversation with Latasha earlier this week, and I found that there's a lot of common ground on priorities for her concerns in criminal justice. And I put her in contact with somebody who I think both will benefit with the resources each person has. And I think what I'm trying to highlight is my role as being a coordinator is also being a resource person. And one of the other reasons why I'd like you to email me is I hope you'll take some time, and I'm going to try to reach out individually as well to find out more individually what priorities you want to take on or would like to have connections within the chapter. So one of the things that I will be sending to you is the direct link to the VICPP priority page. And then what I did is, before I did the meeting here, that was one thing I needed to take time and refresh my mind on what indeed are the priorities that we were working on. And I put a sheet together on that. I'm curious, obviously one of the things that's a priority that's not so much listed as a priority, but the Day for All People. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to attend the Day for All People a couple of times. And it was really interesting when Sheila was talking about the support and need for midwives. One of the people I ended up touring with as we went to visit the legislators was actually a midwife. And it was really fascinating to hear her talk about the importance of the bill and the experiences that she had had being out in rural Western Virginia. So that was very enlightening. I'm also curious, a second thing I've put on the list is how many of us actually have links to our specific legislators. Now, I'm really fortunate in that Ms. Anderson, who we now have, is really sending out lots of emails that I'm able to keep track of. But I want to do a better job of making sure I'm communicating to both our senator and representative in the State House. And then there's also a third thing is the 100% congregation initiative. Sheila, actually, let me ask you briefly. I'm curious about if there's still a push to have the 100% congregation signature available to congregations.
The shortest answer is yes. Virginia has elections every single year, and we love, congregations voting your values is important every single year. So this year's federal, it'll be a little bit, I suspect we'll have a less intensive push because it's federal instead of state. But yes, we are absolutely going to be doing 100% voting. I think we're looking to launch the toolkit in June or July. That's usually when we aim for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But basically, if you haven't heard before, congregations can sign up to be to commit to getting 100% voting turnout. So that means obviously you can't guarantee that you're not going to walk with your members to the polls and watch them all vote. But you are going to encourage your members to vote, whether that's through by preaching, by putting out bulletin announcements, by sharing resources, etc. So we provide some of those resources, and we give a giant banner for sharing outside of your faith community. And we, I can point you to our toolkit from last year, but yes, being involved in getting out the vote and joining the 100% voting congregation initiative is definitely something we would love to have y'all do.
Okay, so it's one thing I've included. Again, I've sent you, as we've been talking, I've been adding stuff to the priority list. So in conclusion, we're just have a few minutes left. I'd like to hear from the rest of you, because again, one of the things that Sheila and I talked about on Monday has to do, and it's one of the things I've listed is VICPP wants to initiate more listening sessions. And Sheila and I found that we're in total agreement on this. And I want to hear more from each of our partners or members of the chapter about we have all this food on the plate and which things can we do as a chapter to support the priorities that you as an individual or you as a congregation have. So, Latasha, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have my camera off to I'm kind of working and multitasking, so forgive me for that based on what I'm doing. All right. Anyhow, I have a quick question in regards to the guns and guarding planning event. First of all, kudos to all that's involved in that. And it takes a lot for event planning and the successes that have come with it. But my question that I would have is that is there a mechanism in place to track and kind of be able to present the data from it? You know, when we talk about successes, are they measurable, like from the beginning when it started, and you know how many people attend and how many guns are secured and turned into tools, and the impact that it's having on the community? Like, is there something already in place that if I wanted to see, like, oh, okay, this is great, and it's, you know, definitive that it has been successful because it's the impact has been made in the community. So basically, is there a data tracking mechanism in place to show, yeah, this has proven to do what it's set out to do in accordance to that legislative priority, whatever it may be. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there's two things involved here. As far as documenting what our James River chapter has done, it's mostly been word of mouth. I mean, we know with the 3 events that we've had that last year's at Williamsburg United Methodist Church, we had more weapons turned in than before. I'm going to ask Michael, do you know through Raw Tools and Guns to Gardens, I mean, since they've been doing this longer, I don't know their website well enough to know if they document all the successes that they've had.
The Presbyterian Peace Fellowship gathers their data through the surveys that they suggest folks that do these events give out. And that way they hear back how many guns were dismantled. They get a brief idea of you know, what what bucket to put the why in, you know, whether this was, you know, a late husband's, you know, collection, or whether this is someone who really wants to get this off the street, or somebody who's worried about their own safety. But really, that's about it.
Would you
It
name that again? The
Sure, the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship does track the data through the surveys that they offer us to offer folks, and then which we send back to them if we so choose. That's about the most in terms of data tracking. You know, you can look at gun violence statistics in any given community we've done this in. There's no way to isolate the variable to say that we did that. This is ultimately more of a symbolic act than it is a, you know, massive reduction of guns on the streets.
Right.
Um, and we've known that there is some friction with that, and the stated purpose of this group as being a public policy group, we've named that, we've worked through that, we're continuing to do so. Um, and it's part of why it's sort of our project rather than Richmond's project a lot
Yeah.
of times. But yeah, ultimately, I think the challenge is that that data would be very hard to isolate for that particular variable to actually be able to definitively say that we've had this effect on this community.
Okay. And with that, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you for taking time out. I appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us. And I hope we've all learned and can celebrate the successes VICPP has had this legislative season. So long. Talk to you soon. Send me an email and I'll be in touch.